if you spend, your working life on a hospital floor, there is this distinct, inescapable soundtrack that underpins every single shift.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is constant.
Right. It's the relentless, ubiquitous beep of the telemetry monitors. So, welcome to this deep dive. This is a whole life healthcare production.
Thrilled to be here for this one.
Today, we are dissecting that exact soundtrack. Our mission is to really separate the signal from the noise. We want to uncover the critical mechanics of what makes an alarm actionable versus non-actionable.
Which is such a massive pain point for anyone in the field right now.
It really is. And we're also going to break down some very specific, practical ways for you, whether you are tuning in as a monitor tech or a floor clinician, to navigate this landscape better.
Because the sheer volume of telemetry data being processed on a standard step-down unit today is, honestly, it's staggering.
Yeah.
I mean, we're tracking continuous waveforms, oxygen saturation, respiration rates. We are literally generating thousands of data points per patient per hour.
And to make sense of where this system is actually succeeding and where it's just completely breaking down, we're synthesizing a really broad stack of literature today.
We've got a lot to cover.
We do.
Oh.
We are looking at the Pennsylvania Patient Safety Reporting System data, clinical outcomes from the Beaumont Hospital Communication Study, and the Yale PLSE trial.
All really heavy-hitting studies.
Exactly. Plus, we're incorporating the HCA Healthcare Telemetry Safety Bundle, the Oroville Hospital Baseline Standards, and some highly compelling machine learning research on filtering out false alarms.
And what stands out immediately across all these sources is this massive discrepancy.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a huge gap between the sophistication of the technology and the actual chaotic environment it operates in. I mean, some ICU settings report that up to 90% of their alarms are false positives.
Wait, 90%?
Yeah, 90.
That is, when you have a system generating that many false positives, it fundamentally alters the way the human brain processes the information.
Oh, without a doubt. It just becomes background noise.
Right. And let's look at the Pennsylvania Patient Safety Reporting System, the PA-PSRS data. They analyzed 558 telemetry failure events over a 5-year period.
And you would assume, right, that these failures were due to, complex software glitches or hardware short circuits?
Exactly. You'd think it's a massive tech failure. But no, 37.1% of those critical failures were simply user errors.
Almost half. That is just wild to think about.
It is. And let me break that down even more. 14% of those failures were caused by dead or improperly inserted batteries in the telemetry transmitters.
Oh, man. Just AA batteries.
Yep. And another 12.9% occurred because the patient physically wasn't connected to the monitor at all, despite an active telemetry order.
So almost a third of severe safety events come down to batteries and literally just forgetting to plug the hardware into the patient.
Exactly. It's a massive systemic vulnerability.
And I think it perfectly illustrates the downstream effects of alarm fatigue.
How so?
Well, when clinicians are just bombarded with non-actionable alarms like a loose lead, poor skin contact, a low battery warning, the brain undergoes what we call sensory habituation.
Okay, sensory habituation.
Right. The reticular activating system in your brainstem, which is responsible for filtering stimuli and regulating your arousal, it begins to classify the telemetry beep not as an urgent threat, but as ambient background noise.
Wow. So it physically changes how you hear it.
Literally. The auditory cortex just stops prioritizing the sound.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's essentially the smoke detector analogy.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Like, if you live in a house where the smoke detector goes off every single time you toast bread, you eventually just take the batteries out.
Right. The stimulus completely loses its meaning.
Exactly. But in a clinical setting, taking the batteries out or minimizing that noise has catastrophic consequences. Are we setting our clinicians up to fail by burying these actionable emergencies in a mountain of technical noise?
I mean, the data suggests we absolutely are. The Pennsylvania Safety Report details a very specific, chilling case.
Right, the 76-year-old patient.
Yes. A 76-year-old with a history of atrial fibrillation had a 21-beat run of ventricular tachycardia.
Which is a highly actionable, critical event.
Completely actionable, but no one responded.
Why?
The investigation revealed that the alarm volume at the nurse's station had been manually turned completely down.
Just to silence the constant barrage of non-actionable notifications.
Exactly. And out of the 16 serious events detailed in that specific PA-PSRS cohort, 13 resulted in patient death.
13. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Those fatalities are the ultimate cost of a low signal-to-noise ratio. The sheer volume of non-actionable data just completely buries the actionable emergencies.
So if alarm fatigue and cognitive overload on the floor clinician is the core vulnerability, the traditional logic has always been to separate the noise from the floor entirely, right?
Right, which brings us to the whole monitor-watcher model.
Exactly. You hire a dedicated person, you put a technician in a centralized room, and their only job is to just watch the screens. The idea is they filter the data before it ever reaches the bedside nurse.
And intuitively, centralizing the surveillance makes total sense.
It does on paper.
You take the cognitive load off the nurse who's, actively hanging IV meds or assessing a patient, and you give it to a specialist whose sole focus is rhythm analysis.
And the baseline standards for those specialists are incredibly rigorous, like looking at the Orville Hospital guidelines and the HCA safety bundle.
Oh yeah, they do not mess around.
No, they don't. A monitor tech is required to run and mount strips every 4 hours and verify rhythms. And the protocols dictate strict clinical techniques.
Right, like mandating the use of the V1 lead to distinguish true ventricular tachycardia from aberrancy, which is just wide atrial tachycardia.
Yes, and they also require changing the ECG electrodes every 48 hours.
Because the conductive gel dries out.
Exactly. The gel dries out, which increases impedance, creates artifact, and just drives up the false alarm rate all over again.
So those protocols represent the ideal state of telemetry monitoring.
Right. But then we have the Yale PLSE trial.
Oh, this study is fascinating.
It really is. They wanted to test whether this centralized surveillance model actually translates to better clinical outcomes in practice. They evaluated 11,136 nurses and 1,189 patients across multiple units.
Just a massive sample size.
Huge. They wanted to see if having dedicated monitor watchers actually improved the accuracy of arrhythmia detection.
And the outcome of that trial basically disrupts the entire premise of the centralized watcher.
It totally does.
Yeah.
The units with dedicated monitor watchers saw an accuracy rate of 54.8%.
Okay.
The units without the dedicated watchers had an accuracy rate of 55.4%.
Wait, really? It was actually higher without them?
Marginally, but essentially it was a statistical wash.
Yeah.
Adding a dedicated set of eyeballs in a remote room did absolutely nothing to improve arrhythmia detection.
That is wild. But when you look at the underlying reasons, the failure of the watcher model really comes down to the physiological limits of human vigilance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's the vigilance decrement, and then there's the problem of contextual blindness.
Okay, let's break those down.
Sure. From a cognitive science perspective, watching dozens of dynamic waveforms for a 12-hour shift induces a severe vigilance decrement. It has this mesmerizing effect.
I can only imagine.
And some protocols have a single technician assigned to 48 patients simultaneously.
48?
Yes. Human working memory and visual attention simply cannot sustain high-level discrimination across 48 moving targets without degrading. It's physically impossible.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's like having a dedicated passenger in a car whose only job is to shout out every single road sign they pass.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, without the context of the actual destination or knowing if the driver's already braking, shouting yield, it just adds chaos to the cabin.
It doesn't prevent a crash, it just adds to the noise.
Exactly. So how can a monitor tech sitting 3 floors away possibly interpret if an alarm is actionable without the physical context of the patient?
Well, the short answer is they cannot. And that is the contextual blindness piece.
Right.
The remote watcher only sees the electrical shadow on the wall. They don't know that, say, physical therapy is in the room doing mobility exercises.
Which creates massive movement artifact on the screen.
Exactly. Or they don't know the patient is standing there brushing their teeth.
Wait, brushing their teeth?
Oh yeah, toothbrushing frequently mimics the high-frequency amplitude of V-touch on a monitor.
Yeah, it is crazy.
But without knowing the patient's baseline or what's physically happening in the room, the watcher is flying blind. They are forced to trigger an alarm for everything that crosses the threshold, which just pushes the noise right back to the floor clinician.
So if throwing extra eyeballs at a screen doesn't fix the problem, the real fix has to lie in how the watcher communicates with the bedside clinician.
Absolutely. The bottleneck isn't necessarily the remote analysis, it's the communication loop.
Which brings us to the Beaumont Hospital pilot study. This study is just a masterclass in how redesigning that communication loop fundamentally changes the entire telemetry environment.
The scale of this study was huge, too.
Oh, yeah. It spanned a 1,061-bed hospital with 264 telemetry channels. They ran a comparison between the old-school legacy system, which used alphanumeric pagers, and a modern two-way voice-activated Vocera badge system.
And the contrast in the metrics here is just stark.
Yeah, so with the pagers, the process was highly fragmented. The tech would observe an alarm and send a text page, and the data showed the communication loop was only closed 19% of the time.
Only 19%, because the friction in that legacy workflow is immense.
Oh, for sure.
The bedside nurse receives this vague text page. They have to stop their current clinical task, maybe break their sterile field, pause their assessment, locate a landline, and call the monitoring room just to get the context.
Right, requiring multiple pages sometimes. And it took an average of 1.6 minutes just to make first contact.
But then, with the two-way voice badges, which allow the tech to speak directly into the nurse's earpiece in real time,
Loop closure jumped to an incredible 100%.
that is just night and day.
Every single alarm was actively acknowledged, and the time to first contact plummeted to just half a minute,
Yeah.
30 seconds.
The process efficiency is undeniable, but, the most revealing metric from the Beaumont study is what happened to the physical workflow of the nurses after they received the notification.
Yes, this is the data point that initially confused me so much.
It's a fascinating twist in the data.
Right, so the study tracked task completion, which they defined as the nurse physically crossing the threshold into the patient's room to intervene.
Okay.
With the slow, inefficient text pagers, physical room entry was 97%.
Almost every time.
Exactly. But with the new instantaneous voice badges, physical room entry dropped to only 61%.
Great.
Wait, so the better technology made the nurses go into the room less. How is that a win? That seems like a step backward for patient safety.
I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it looks that way on paper.
Yeah.
If you equate room entry with quality of care. But the reality of the workflow tells a completely different story.
Okay, explain that for us.
It's about verbal triage. This is actually a massive victory for identifying actionable versus non-actionable alarms. Because the nurse and the tech could physically speak in real time, they could verbally filter out the non-actionable noise.
Ah, I see. Because the tech isn't just sending a generic room 402 alarm text anymore.
Precisely the opposite. The tech can articulate the clinical picture. They can say, hey, room 402 has a leads-off alarm on the right arm, but their pleth waveform on the pulse ox is totally stable.
Wow, okay.
And the nurse, who might be titrating a critical drip in another room, can process that context and say, acknowledged, the patient is stable, I will replace the lead in 5 minutes.
So the nurse is empowered to prioritize actual patient care. They aren't forced to drop a critical intervention to sprint down the hall just to stick a piece of adhesive back onto a patient's chest.
Exactly. The voice badge didn't reduce patient care, it reduced unnecessary interruptions.
That makes total sense.
And this concept of verbal triage ties perfectly into the HCA escalation matrix.
Right, let's talk about actionable advice for the clinicians listening.
Yes, to be a better clinician today, you must ensure closed-loop communication. It's a hard standard. When an alarm triggers, you must document the notification, and you must secure confirmation of the resolution.
And if the primary RN doesn't answer?
The protocol dictates it goes to the charge RN and then immediately to a rapid response. No alarm is ever left hanging in the void.
Okay, so better communication clearly fixes the human gap. It bridges the remote watcher and the bedside. But what if we could filter the alarms before they even reach the humans?
Well, that's where things are heading. We are entering the era of predictive, intelligent filtering.
Right, looking at the literature from GE Healthcare, the infrastructure shifting toward digital centralized monitoring units, or CMUs.
And the digital CMU model fundamentally changes the delivery of context.
How so?
Instead of relying on a phone call or a voice badge description from a tech, the digital CMU pushes high-fidelity waveforms, alarm parameters, and integrated lab trends directly to mobile smart devices carried by the clinician.
So what does this all mean? It means you no longer hear a generic beep and have to guess if it's a walk or run situation. Your smartphone literally shows you the urgency.
It decentralizes the context directly into the clinician's hand.
And here's my pushback on this. Even if the smartphone gives you context, an alarm pinging your pocket is still a cognitive interruption.
That's true.
Right. If up to 90% of the alarms are still false positives, we haven't actually solved the fatigue. We've just moved it from the hallway speaker to the clinician's pocket.
Which brings us perfectly to the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is the bleeding-edge research on how we can stop the false positives at the source.
Yes, let's look at the VTAC dataset research paper.
Ventricular tachycardia is an inherently difficult rhythm for legacy software to classify accurately due to complex waveforms.
And the numbers from the VTAC dataset highlight the scale of the problem. Researchers annotated 5,037 specific VTAC alarms from ICU monitors.
And out of those 5,037 critical alarms, 3,596 were false.
Over 3,000 false alarms. That is thousands of unnecessary adrenaline spikes for the training staff.
Exactly. So to combat this, the researchers deployed deep learning models. They trained them to analyze 6-minute segments of patient telemetry data surrounding the alarm event.
Specifically, the 5 minutes preceding the trigger and the 1 minute following it.
Yes, they wanted the AI to evaluate the signal using both time domain and frequency domain features.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of how the AI actually analyzes that data, because it's fundamentally different from how a human tech looks at a strip,
Right, so a human technician primarily evaluates the time domain.
meaning the physical shape of the wave.
Exactly. They look at the physical morphology of the waveform over a sequence of seconds. They measure the RR interval. They observe the widening of the QR simplex. The deep learning model obviously assesses these time domain features too, but it also processes the frequency domain.
Wait, meaning it's looking at the actual constituent frequencies of the electrical signal.
Yes. By using mathematical functions like Fourier transforms, the AI breaks down the complex waveform into its underlying frequencies.
Okay, why is that helpful?
Remember the patient brushing their teeth?
Oh, right, the muscle movement.
Exactly. Muscle artifact from a patient brushing their teeth generates a very specific high-frequency noise that masks the cardiac rhythm on a normal monitor.
Wow.
But the AI can isolate those high-frequency bands, recognize them as motion artifact, and essentially look through the noise to determine if the underlying ventricular depolarization is actually stable.
That is incredible, and the results of this dual-domain analysis are extremely impressive. The deep learning models achieved an ROC-AUC score exceeding 0.96.
Which is phenomenal.
But I want to clarify this for us, because it's an easy metric to misinterpret. An ROC-AUC of 0.96 doesn't mean the AI is simply flat-out correct 96% of the time, does it?
No, that is a very common misconception. ROC-AUC stands for the area under the receiver operating characteristic curve.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
I know, right? But it is a metric of discrimination, not flat accuracy. An ROC-AUC of 0.96 means there is a 96% probability that the model will score a randomly chosen true VTAC event higher than a randomly chosen false alarm.
Oh, I see.
It measures the algorithm's ability to successfully separate the signal from the noise.
It's a measure of separability. The AI is essentially acting as the ultimate gatekeeper.
Exactly.
It possesses the mathematical capability to suppress the alarm for the toothbrushing artifact while immediately passing through the true 21-beat run of VTAC. It drastically reduces the cognitive burden on the staff.
Because when the AI finally does trigger an alarm, its confidence interval is incredibly high. It restores the meaning of the alarm.
This has been such a deeply mechanical, highly revealing look at the systems governing modern healthcare. Let's distill the core insights into actionable takeaways for you, the listener.
Absolutely.
If you're a telemetry tech or a clinician looking to elevate your practice today, the data points to a few distinct mandates. First, you have to relentlessly manage the physical basics.
I cannot stress that enough.
Change the transmitter batteries, ensure proper skin prep, and secure those leads. Adhere to the 48-hour electrode replacement protocols to minimize that baseline impedance and artifact.
Second, you must strictly adhere to closed-loop communication in your personal workflow. If an alarm triggers, verbalize the context, secure confirmation from the receiving clinician, and document the resolution.
Never assume the alarm was heard.
Right. Never leave an alert hanging.
And third, always seek the clinical context before treating the beep. The monitor is a diagnostic tool. It is not the patient.
Exactly. The waveforms only have meaning when applied to the physical reality of the person in the bed.
But, as we transition into this next era of digital CMUs and deep learning filters, it does leave us with a fascinating dynamic.
It really raises an important, lingering question regarding human proficiency.
What are you thinking about?
Well, as artificial intelligence algorithms get incredibly good at filtering out non-actionable alarms, achieving that 96% separability, are we exposing ourselves to automation bias?
Automation bias, meaning the tendency to over-rely on the machine's output.
Exactly. Previous generations of nurses and monitor techs developed a clinical sixth sense, an intuitive pattern recognition, simply because they spent thousands of hours constantly evaluating raw, unfiltered rhythms.
They learned what subtle artifacts look like because they had to.
Right, so if the machine filters out all the noise and only presents us with the perfectly curated high-confidence events, will the next generation of clinicians lose that intuitive skill?
That's a scary thought.
If the computer algorithm says the patient is stable, will we slowly stop double-checking the raw data ourselves?
It is the ultimate double-edged sword. We deploy the technology to save our clinicians from cognitive fatigue, but the cost of that convenience might just be the slow erosion of human intuition.
It is a tension the industry will have to navigate very carefully.
Definitely something for you to mull over on your next shift. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this whole life healthcare deep dive. We hope this exploration gives you a much deeper structural understanding of how to manage the relentless telemetry environment.
Thanks for having me.
Don't forget, you can catch this and all our other deep dives on Spotify and YouTube. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.